At the heart of a land shaped by promises and betrayals, there was a tribe destined for greatness, a tribe that received blessings above many others. Its name, Ephraim. Strong, influential, and powerful, Ephraim was not just an ordinary tribe. It was a symbol of success, leadership, and divine favor. But like a star that shines brightly before it falls, its pride would become the cause of its ruin. How could such a prosperous tribe turn against its own people? What led Ephraim, the heir of a special blessing, to self-destruction? The answers lie hidden within a story of pride, rivalry, and tragedy. Are you ready to unravel this mystery? The fate of Ephraim is a grim lesson on how power can blind even the most blessed. Like a seed planted in fertile soil, Ephraim grew in stature and influence. Its territory was vast, its people were numerous, and its voice was heard among the tribes of Israel. But what happens when ambition turns into arrogance? When the thirst for recognition outweighs the duty of unity? These questions echo through Ephraim's history, for it was pride that ultimately distanced them from their glorious destiny. And so, their rise turned into a downfall, a fall so impactful that its echoes can still be felt today. Imagine a tribe with the potential to lead an entire nation. Ephraim had everything it needed to be the central force of Israel. However, its desire for dominance went too far. Like a mirror reflecting the darkest side of human ambition, Ephraim chose the path of discord. But why? What was in their hearts that drove them to challenge their own brothers? Were they so blinded by their own greatness that they failed to see the precipice ahead? In every detail of this narrative, there is a clear warning. Pride comes before destruction. And when the fall happens, it is devastating. Ephraim did not fall overnight. Its downfall was built step by step through decisions fueled by vanity. Each conflict, each demand for power, each refusal to unite with the other tribes added another brick to their ruin. But what was the exact moment when pride became an irreversible poison? At what point did the pursuit of recognition turn into an act of rebellion? It is precisely this thin line between ambition and self-destruction that we will explore. And as the story unfolds, you will see how small choices can lead to irreversible consequences. Get ready to dive into a story where alliances are broken and loyalty is put to the test. A story that reminds us that power, when not balanced with humility, can become a dangerous burden. The fate of Ephraim is not just a tale of the past, it is a warning for the present. How many times do we let pride drive us away from those who matter most? How many opportunities for unity are lost in the name of ego? If you're as intrigued as I am, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because this story is going to surprise you. Now, imagine what is yet to come. What led Ephraim into such deep conflict that it forever marked their existence? What events transformed a tribe of blessings into a symbol of warning? Keep watching, because in the next moments we will unveil every detail of this ancient yet incredibly relevant drama. After all, pride is a silent enemy, and before we realize it, it may have already led us to the edge of the fall. To understand the fall of Ephraim, we need to go back to the beginning. Who were the Ephraimites after all? The answer takes us to Joseph, Jacob's favorite son. Joseph, who overcame the envy of his brothers, slavery and imprisonment, rose to become the governor of Egypt, a man whose story is marked by trials and triumphs. And to him, Jacob granted a special blessing, divided between his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. But curiously, Jacob reversed the natural order of blessings, favoring the younger Ephraim over the firstborn Manasseh. Why? What deeper meaning lies behind this choice? Ephraim, therefore, was born with a unique advantage. From the very beginning, he was destined for greatness. Jacob's blessing was not merely symbolic, it was prophetic. It foretold that Ephraim's descendants would be numerous, influential, and powerful. And that's exactly what happened. Among the 12 tribes of Israel, Ephraim quickly stood out. Their land was fertile, strategically located at the heart of Canaan, giving them control over essential trade and military routes. Their population grew, their wealth increased, and their political influence expanded. Ephraim seemed to be born to lead, but with great blessings come great responsibilities and sometimes even greater pride. It wasn't just geography that favored Ephraim. Historically, the tribe played a crucial role in Israel's most important moments. Powerful leaders and influential judges emerged from its ranks. Joshua, the great conqueror of Canaan and successor of Moses, was an Ephraimite. Under his leadership, Israel entered the Promised Land. This further elevated the tribe's status, reinforcing the belief that Ephraim was destined for supremacy. And here arises a fundamental question. To what extent can power and prestige shape or corrupt the destiny of a people? The influence of the Ephraimites was so great that in many instances the name Ephraim was used to refer to the entire northern kingdom of Israel. The tribe took on a central role in the political and spiritual affairs of the nation. Their voice was strong and their decisions echoed across the region. Ephraim was always at the center of attention. But there is a hidden danger in being at the top. Pride, the feeling of entitlement to power, the belief that leadership was their birthright, began to create internal fractures. The lingering question remains, would Ephraim use its influence to unite, or would its desire for domination end up destroying everything? This thirst for dominance became evident on multiple occasions. Ephraim expected to be consulted and revered in every major national decision. When they weren't, the tribe reacted with resentment and at times hostility. This gradually distanced them from the other tribes, creating tensions that would later erupt into bloody conflicts. Like a castle built on unstable ground, Ephraim's foundation was compromised by pride and arrogance. What seemed like natural leadership turned into an insatiable desire for absolute power. Now that you understand the origin and rise of the tribe of Ephraim, the question remains, what happens when a people destined for greatness choose the path of vanity? How can pride transform blessings into curses? The story of Ephraim forces us to reflect on the dangers of unchecked power, of an ego left unchecked. And so, with the rise came the fall. But what exactly triggered the downfall of the tribe that nearly dominated Israel? Pride was about to exact a high price, and the consequences would be irreversible. If you're curious to know how pride began to erode the very foundations of this once powerful tribe, keep watching so you don't miss a single detail of this fascinating story. The fate of Ephraim is about to be revealed, and I guarantee that the upcoming revelations will astonish you. Pride is a silent enemy. It does not reveal itself immediately but creeps in slowly, corrupting even the strongest foundations. And for Ephraim, it was no different. The tribe that had received so many blessings and privileges began to see its greatness as an unquestionable right. Leadership? They believed it was their birthright. Recognition? It was something they demanded, not something they sought to earn. But when power goes to one's head, the cracks begin to form. And so, Ephraim's pride planted the seeds of its own downfall. How could a tribe so favored be led astray by such a destructive flaw? After all, does it not say in Proverbs 16:18, "Pride goeth before destruction, and an haughty spirit before a fall"? Ephraim's relationship with the other tribes of Israel began to deteriorate as they started to see themselves as superior. They expected to be consulted in every military and political decision. They expected to lead, to be admired, to be revered. And when that didn't happen, they felt betrayed. A clear example of this arrogance was when Gideon, one of Israel's judges, led a decisive victory against the Midianites. Instead of celebrating the people's victory, Ephraim complained that they had not been called to battle from the very beginning. Judges 8:1. This incident exposed a defining trait of the tribe, their constant need for the spotlight, a people destined for leadership but incapable of accepting any secondary role. Pride had become a poison, and from that moment on, their downfall was only a matter of time. Ephraim's hostility toward its own brethren became more evident. Instead of uniting to strengthen Israel, they nurtured rivalries. Every victory in which they played no central role was seen as an offense. Every decision made without their input became a source of discord. As a result, they began to isolate themselves, creating barriers between them and the rest of the tribes. What could have been a unifying leadership turned into a source of division. And so the question arises, would Ephraim have resisted the temptation of pride if they had truly understood the meaning of leadership? After all, isn't it pride that turns allies into rivals and transforms small disputes into inevitable wars? But pride doesn't just divide, it blinds. It blinds people to opportunities for reconciliation, blinds them to the necessity of humility. Ephraim came to believe that its position of prominence would be eternal, that their strength, influence, and prestige would never be challenged. However, history teaches us that greatness, when not sustained by humility, is doomed to collapse. When the moment of challenge arrived, Ephraim was unprepared. The tribe that believed itself to be invincible was caught off guard by a harsh reality. Pride, left unchecked, turns blessings into curses. Just as the prophet Hosea would later declare, Ephraim is joined to idols, let him alone. Hosea 4:17, a clear warning that their spiritual and moral downfall was irreversible. Ephraim's fall was not triggered by a single event, but by a series of decisions fueled by vanity. They abandoned cooperation and mutual respect in favor of empty pride. With every internal conflict, with every dispute, the foundation of their greatness grew weaker. They failed to understand that true power comes from unity and humility. Pride blinded them to the reality that their strength depended on harmony with the other tribes. And then, when the greatest of all challenges arose, a direct confrontation that required unity and wisdom, Ephraim chose the path of arrogance and rebellion. The stage was set for an inevitable tragedy. The tensions, once contained, were about to overflow. Pride had built a wall too high to climb, and the cost of their arrogance would soon be paid. The decisions made from this moment forward would define not only Ephraim's destiny, but also leave deep scars in the history of Israel. And when the final confrontation came, there was no longer room for reconciliation. The path the tribe had chosen grew narrower with every step, leading them, slowly and inevitably, toward destruction. Pride, long fermenting in the heart of Ephraim, finally found the perfect ground to explode into open conflict. The stage was set. Gilead, under the leadership of Jephthah, had just secured a major victory against the Ammonites. A victory that should have been celebrated by all the tribes of Israel. But for Ephraim, not being at the center of this triumph was a severe blow to their ego. They could not accept being left out. Resentment grew, and wounded pride turned into a threat. Like a storm ready to break, the tribe of Ephraim marched against Gilead. After all, how could a tribe that considered itself superior accept being sidelined in a moment of glory? The biblical account in Judges 12:1 reveals the extent of their arrogance. And the men of Ephraim gathered themselves together and went northward, and said unto Jephthah, Wherefore passedst thou over to fight against the children of Ammon, and didst not call us to go with thee? We will burn thine house upon thee with fire. These words carried more than mere discontent. They revealed an inflamed pride, incapable of accepting another's glory. This was not just about battle, it was about power, status, and control. Ephraim's threatening tone left no doubt. They wanted to assert their dominance over Gilead, even if it meant resorting to violence. But why did Ephraim consider Gilead inferior? To them, Gilead was nothing more than a mixed territory, inhabited by descendants whom the Ephraimites viewed as second class. They used words of scorn, calling the Gileadites fugitives, an insult that exposed the superiority complex they had nurtured for years. This contempt reveals a harsh truth. Pride not only corrupts how we see ourselves, but it also distorts how we perceive others. To Ephraim, Gilead had no right to shine, and Jephthah's victory was a painful reminder that their power was not as absolute as they had imagined. However, Jephthah was not a man to back down from threats. His history of rejection and resilience had made him a leader hardened by adversity. He had been cast out of his own house for being the son of a prostitute, yet he returned as the deliverer of Gilead. And when Ephraim confronted him, Jephthah responded with firmness. "I and my people were in great strife with the Ammonites, and when I called you, you did not save me from their hands." Judges 12:2. Jephthah exposed Ephraim's hypocrisy. They complained about not being called, but when they were, they refused to help. This response only fueled the tension further. Conflict was inevitable. Ephraim's attack was not just a display of strength, it was an act of provocation fueled by wounded pride. By threatening to burn down Jephthah's house, the tribe was not merely challenging him, but all of Gilead. It was as if they were saying, either you acknowledge our superiority, or you suffer the consequences. But Ephraim failed to realize that in doing so, they were digging their own grave. Their desire for dominance blinded them to the reality that Gilead was not weak, and Jephthah was not a leader who would submit easily. The battle that followed was filled with tension and desperation. Ephraim, overconfident in its superiority, underestimated the strength and determination of the Gileadites. What could have been resolved through diplomacy quickly escalated into war. Ephraim's pride had led them to this point, but it would be their arrogance in underestimating their enemy that would mark the beginning of their destruction. This was not just a fight for territory or power, it was a battle of identities, where the pride of one tribe clashed against the resilience and dignity of another. And so, with the first strike, war erupted. A conflict that would not only seal Ephraim's fate, but also leave deep scars on the history of Israel. The choices made up to this moment, driven by pride and unchecked ambition, were about to exact a heavy toll. And what happened next was even more tragic and revealing. When Ephraim's pride erupted into threats, Jephthah's response was relentless. A leader forged in rejection and battle, Jephthah did not hesitate. He knew that to retreat would mean surrendering to the arrogance of an overbearing tribe, and to give in would mean placing Gilead under Ephraim's control. In Judges 12:3, Jephthah declared, "And when I saw that ye delivered me not, I put my life in my hands, and passed over against the children of Ammon, and the Lord delivered them into my hand. Wherefore then are ye come up unto me this day to fight against me?" His words were not just a defense, they were a challenge, a reminder that Gilead fought alone when no one else was willing to help. Now Ephraim wanted to reap the glory of a victory they had not won. But Ephraim was not willing to back down. Their pride had been wounded too deeply to accept a mere speech as an answer. The tension, which had seemed contained, finally exploded. Ephraim believed their strength was superior, that their heritage granted them the right to rule. They underestimated Jephthah and the Gileadites, and that was their fatal mistake. What began as a verbal dispute quickly turned into a full-scale conflict. A war fueled by the arrogance of one side and the determination of the other was about to reach its peak. Jephthah, knowing the terrain and the strength of his men, reacted swiftly and strategically. He understood that this battle against Ephraim was not just about territory, it was about honor. If Gilead retreated, they would forever be seen as inferior. If they won, they would shatter the psychological hold Ephraim had over the northern tribes. And so, without hesitation, Jephthah led his men into battle. The war that Ephraim had provoked would now decide their fate, a fate sealed by their arrogance and their refusal to acknowledge the worth of others. The war was brutal. Ephraim, accustomed to being revered by the other tribes, was not prepared for an enemy willing to fight to the death. The battle was not just physical, it was symbolic. Every strike, every advance represented the crumbling of the illusion of Ephraim's superiority. Jephthah, on the other hand, fought for survival and dignity. To him, defeating Ephraim meant freeing Gilead from the stigma of inferiority that had been imposed upon them. It was a fight to prove that true strength is not found in heritage, but in action. Ephraim was shocked by Gilead's ferocity. The same pride that had given them an illusion of invincibility now blinded them to the reality of war. Every Ephraimite retreat was another blow to their carefully cultivated image of absolute power. The war, which could have been avoided through humility and understanding, had now become an inevitable bloodbath. Jephthah and his men pressed forward, pushing Ephraim further and further back. The tribe's pride began to collapse under the weight of impending defeat. In the heat of battle, the lines between pride and survival became blurred. Ephraim was no longer fighting to win, they were fighting to salvage their wounded honor. But Jephthah and his warriors fought with the fury of men who had everything to lose. The battlefield became a stage where the arrogance of one tribe and the resilience of another clashed in an irreversible confrontation. Every victory for Gilead was a humiliation for Ephraim, a stark reminder that arrogance is no substitute for true strength. As the battle raged on, it became clear that Ephraim was at a disadvantage. Their assumed superiority had disappeared, and what remained was a desperate people, struggling to preserve their shattered reputation. Jephthah's response had been more than just effective, it was final. But the conflict would not end here. Something even darker was on the horizon, a cruel outcome that would forever mark the history of Ephraim. Pride had led them to war, but war was about to lead them to an even greater tragedy. As the dust of battle seemed to settle, the conflict between Gilead and Ephraim took an even darker turn. The Gileadites, led by Jephthah, had defeated Ephraim on the battlefield, but the war was not over yet. Many Ephraimites attempted to flee, seeking to cross the Jordan River and return to their lands. However, Jephthah knew that if he allowed the survivors to escape, Ephraim would regroup and rise again as a threat. It was necessary to ensure that the tribe could not reorganize for another attack. And so one of the most tragic and symbolic episodes of this entire story unfolded. The test of the word Shibboleth. Judges 12:5-6 describes this chilling moment. And the Gileadites took the passages of Jordan before the Ephraimites. And it was so that when those Ephraimites which were escaped said, "Let me go over," that the men of Gilead said unto him, "Art thou an Ephraimite?" If he said, "Nay," then said they unto him, "Say now Shibboleth." And he said, "Sibboleth," for he could not frame to pronounce it right. Then they took him and slew him at the passages of Jordan. A single word became a death sentence. A small linguistic detail separated life from death. The mispronunciation of Shibboleth revealed the fugitive's Ephraimite origin. This dialectal difference proved fatal. What should have been a simple cultural trait became the deciding factor in a massacre. Over 42,000 Ephraimites perished in this event. This staggering number reveals not only the brutality of the moment, but also the depth of division between the tribes. How could something as small as a pronunciation define the fate of so many? The answer lies in the powerful symbolism of this story. The same pride that fueled the war was now exacting its ultimate price, even in the way words were spoken. This episode forces us to reflect on how unchecked pride can lead to unthinkable consequences. Ephraim, once considering itself superior, now found itself reduced to a single linguistic test. One mispronounced word, and life was instantly taken. This event was not just an act of vengeance or territorial control. It was a harsh reminder that pride does not only separate through grand decisions, but also through the smallest of differences. The Jordan River, which had so often symbolized crossing and renewal, now became a site of death and ultimate separation. The massacre at the Jordan also reveals something profound about human nature. Language, which should serve as a means of communication and unity, was turned into an instrument of judgment and destruction. The test of Shibboleth showed that when pride and arrogance rule, even culture and identity can become lethal weapons. Ephraim, once so proud of its status, was now identified and eliminated over a mere sound. What should have been a symbol of cultural identity became a mark of doom. The death toll, 42,000 men, was not just a war statistic. Each lost life represented the downfall of a tribe that had everything to be great, but chose the path of arrogance instead. With every Ephraimite who fell, the tribe's former glory faded. This massacre marked the end of Ephraim as a dominant force in Israel, a tribe that had nearly ruled, but because it could not control its pride, ultimately destroyed itself. The Jordan River was no longer just a boundary to be crossed. It became the line between survival and oblivion. Ephraim's fate was sealed not on the battlefield, but at a point of passage. Their final attempts to flee and survive were crushed by a simple pronunciation test. This moment symbolized the complete downfall of a tribe that once believed itself above all others. The pride that had fueled their ambitions also dictated their destruction. Every life lost at the Jordan echoed a single lesson. Even the greatest glories can be undone by the smallest mistakes. And in Ephraim's case, a single misplaced syllable was enough to mark the end of its legacy of power and arrogance. The fate of Ephraim stands as a silent yet powerful reminder of how pride can lead even the most blessed to ruin. A tribe that had everything, blessings, power, influence, and a promising future, but lost it all by failing to understand the value of humility and unity. The massacre at the Jordan marked the end of an era for Ephraim, but the echo of their fall resonates far beyond that tragic moment. Their story remains an eternal warning. Even the greatest can fall when pride overshadows wisdom. What lessons can we draw from this dark narrative? Throughout their history, Ephraim demonstrated that true leadership is not built solely on power and status. Their relentless pursuit of recognition and dominance blinded them to what truly mattered. The same pride that fueled their rise led them into war and destruction. And isn't that the same in our own lives? How often do we let the desire to be noticed or recognized distance us from those who truly matter? Proverbs 11:2 reminds us, "When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom." Ephraim ignored this wisdom and paid the ultimate price. The tragedy of the word Shibboleth carries deep symbolism. A simple detail, a mispronounced word, determined the fate of thousands. This forces us to reflect. How many divisions, conflicts, and tragedies arise from small differences? Ephraim's intolerance of accepting any role other than dominance within Israel reveals how pride can turn even the smallest details into reasons for separation. In this context, language became a weapon, and the Jordan became a fatal boundary. When pride goes unchecked, cultural and social differences become tools of destruction instead of bridges for unity. But what did Ephraim's fall truly mean for Israel? The loss of such an influential tribe left a vacuum of power and identity. Ephraim could have been the bridge between the tribes, uniting the kingdom in times of crisis. Instead, they became a symbol of wounded pride and wasted opportunity. Their legacy could have been one of wise leadership and unity, but instead it became a cautionary tale. This lost legacy forces us to reflect on our own paths. What kind of mark are we leaving? Does arrogance push us toward oblivion, or does humility guide us toward eternity? The prophet Hosea warned about Ephraim's spiritual and moral downfall. In Hosea 5:5 he declared, "The arrogance of Israel testifies against them. Israel and Ephraim stumble in their sin." This prophecy speaks not just of a historical event, but of a universal truth. Pride does not just expose individual weaknesses, it weakens entire communities. Ephraim's story is not unique. It applies to any context where ego and arrogance outweigh a shared purpose. Ephraim's downfall teaches us that true greatness is not found in ruling over others, but in serving them. The most enduring power is the one that builds, not the one that imposes. Their tragedy could have been avoided if only there had been room for humility, for recognizing the value of others. And so, the name of Ephraim, once carrying the weight of Jacob's blessing and Joseph's prestige, became a bitter reminder of all that is lost when pride takes control. A story of power that turned into an eternal warning. In the end, Ephraim's legacy remains a mirror for all of us. Have we learned from their mistakes? Do we recognize when pride threatens our relationships and goals? Or do we continue crossing the Jordan of arrogance, unaware that each step may be our last? Ephraim had their chance, but they chose the path of pride. May this story inspire us to take a different path, one where humility leads to true greatness, and where words, instead of dividing, build lasting bridges.